What's poppin', everybody? This is the Cartoon Kid, Ray Rollins, and we're on the Cartoon Channel where we talk cartoons and we do it every other day, baby. Today I have a classic SpongeBob review for y'all. Today we're reviewing SpongeBob SquarePants Season 1, Episode 7 called Hall Monitor. Now, per usual, man, before we start breaking this episode down, I gotta give y'all that episode breakdown. This episode starts off in Mrs. Puff's boating school. You know, kids are sitting around, droning on, sleeping, snoring as she's going off giving her lectures. You know, spewing the regular teacher shit that teachers spew on about. As they're getting to either wrap up the class day or go on a little break, she decides that it's time to choose the hall monitor of the day. So she's looking through the list of students, going through all the names, thinking about who would make a good choice for the hall monitor. And we as the viewers get to see the list too, and at the bottom of it, of course, she's got good old buddy SpongeBob's name in red ink, which obviously is a clear sign that, hey, she don't want SpongeBob as the hall monitor. So what she's gonna do, she's gonna call on every single person in the class, right? So she's going down the whole list of names, Ralph, Jimmy, Tina, and they're like, nah, man, I did it 3 times already, some of them said. Basically putting up the whole idea that they don't want the job. So of course, SpongeBob's in his seat all excited and whatnot, thinking that he's going to get the hall monitor job, which Miss Puff doesn't want to give it to him. But obviously, she's left with no choice but to give it to him. And SpongeBob, of course, accepts it with grace and honor, you know, jumps up out of his seat, is happy as hell. SpongeBob, of course, gives this long-winded ass speech about being the hall monitor. Bell rings, and the kids in class fly out, trampling him down on the floor. And Mrs. Puff goes to be like, SpongeBob, are you okay? Are you okay? And he's like, I overdid it a little bit with the speech, didn't I? She's like, yeah. So he basically gets up, walks away looking all sad, basically returns the whole hat and belt. But Mrs. Puff ends up showing sympathy for him. She's like, yo, man, here, you can at least wear this for a day, man, just to make him feel good. You know, she's a teacher. She has that compassion for her students. Although she's a boating school teacher, you know, she teaches about boating and whatnot. It's not the same as a good old grade school teacher, but it's a teacher nonetheless. So of course she's gonna have that little compassion in her heart, which makes her a good human being at the end of the day. SpongeBob, of course, ain't gonna turn the offer down and accepts the belt and hat, and basically comes to the conclusion while walking around town and coming across a broken traffic light that he doesn't have to leave his hall monitor duties at the boating school. So he tries to do his best to help out the community. And his way of doing this is trying to help be like a crossing guard of sorts, or not a crossing guard rather, but a traffic director, and trying to direct cars in the proper directions as he acts as a traffic light, which ends up causing a big ass wreck. He also comes across a window that was left open. He, of course, says, I gotta demonstrate to these people what would happen if they keep leaving their windows open, and obviously pretends to be a home invader. He's like, oh, I'm the bikini bottom maniac, or the open window maniac. I forget what he says exactly, but it's one of those two. Then he comes across Patrick eating ice cream very sloppily, basically vandalizing, or in his words, vandalizing Bikini Bottom by getting ice cream all over the place. And he basically ends up hearing about the open window maniac and decides to recruit his best buddy, Patrick Star, to run along with him to catch this guy. So to basically end off the summary here, this episode is basically about SpongeBob and Patrick trying to catch the Bikini Bottom maniac, which they end up finding out later it's SpongeBob. Now, I gotta say, man, my first impressions of this episode, of course, with me being a longtime SpongeBob fan, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this episode, man. It's one of my absolute favorites, one of the good old classics of this series. And I gotta say, man, I freaking love this episode. But rewatching it again today really showed me a few things that I didn't get as a kid, man. First thing that I got from this episode was when SpongeBob was giving his speech. He was like, friends, students, and he said something else. I can't remember what. I was able to put together that, you know, he was trying to take a line from Julius Caesar's speech. It was a line from Julius Caesar's speech from The Tragedy of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, which I wouldn't have gotten as a kid. But it's cool to see that I got that now. As soon as I heard it, I was like, oh snap, that's a line from Julius Caesar. Or rather, it was a play on one, which I thought was pretty cool. Second thing I learned is that Patrick wasn't super dumb in the more modern episodes, which, I mean, granted, he's dumb all the time in every single episode. But in this episode, Patrick's character was at the super dumb level. And of course, to me, it's in a comical sense. Like, I love Patrick Star. That's one of my favorite characters. But whenever we're doing the modern or classic SpongeBob reviews, the discussion of Patrick's stupidity always is brought up. Is he too stupid? Or is this close to season 1 SpongeBob, season 1 version of Patrick? Like, what's the best level of stupidity for Patrick's character? And I gotta say, Patrick in this episode is stupid, but he's also like kiddish stupid. He's not the unbelievably stupid like moron they try to portray in episodes like the Goofy Newbie or the one where he's falling at the Krusty Krab. He has his own little silly moments, but primarily he's put at the level of a kid. You know, he's not able to understand some things, and you can tell like when he sees SpongeBob as the maniac, he starts going crazy. The police hold up the picture. When the police put up the picture, he gets scared. When they take it away, ends up being happy again. They put it up. He gets scared and they take it down. He gets happy, which happens to be one of my most favorite moments out of the episode. But the main point that I'm trying to make it is that in this episode, he is portrayed to be stupid, obviously, but it's at the kid's level of not being able to understand some things. You also see when he sees SpongeBob as the maniac later on during the episode, where he thinks the maniac's chasing after him, he's not able to comprehend that, hey, SpongeBob is the maniac. That scene right there really displays his level of not really understanding or comprehending much out of this whole entire situation. So Patrick, yeah, in the more modern episodes, he's portrayed to be this big dumb idiot who is indeed stupid. But I guess you could say back in season 1 or back in the more classic stages of SpongeBob, he's portrayed to be like a kid who's not able to really comprehend much and probably confuses the more simplest things, you know? However, I did think that Patrick in this episode kind of resembled the more modern day Patrick, actually going back and looking at it. He didn't have super big shining moments or poetic moments where he gives out a nice poetic speech. You know, like the cascading fluffy pillows of white comfort from the Survival of the Idiots episode? Yeah, he ain't tossing them bad boys out. Not in this episode anyway. But enough of my diatribe on my good buddy Patrick. Let's hop into these moments that really stood out to me in this episode. Now, I don't know how I necessarily feel about Mrs. Puff's little relationship with SpongeBob. Yeah, I guess you could say she hates him. You can clearly see that she hates SpongeBob, man. She hates our good buddy. But I do have to say, seeing her show a little bit of compassion, saying, oh man, you know, I'm going to give you this hat and belt, man. You really deserve it. To see her show compassion for him when he's all down and out and he thinks he doesn't deserve the whole hat and belt to be the hall monitor, she's like, oh man. You know, she starts feeling kind of low because she didn't want him to be the hall monitor in the first place. So she ends up giving it to him to show a little bit of compassion. And when he gets out of there, she's like, oh man, what are the consequences of what I just done? Then obviously by the end of that day in Bikini Bottom, she ends up finding out that the consequence of what she did are 6 months in jail, basically. But I gotta say, to see her show compassion to our good buddy after really showing that she hated him, probably some of the previous episodes, or let's say later episodes on in the future, it really shows that she has some compassion, which to kids might be a good thing, because I never really picked up on that. I knew Miss Puff never really liked SpongeBob because he made her job so difficult, but I can see why she hated him. I never had really hate for Mrs. Puff, but it was like, man, I see why you don't like him that much, but come on, man, give our guy a break. But to see her show compassion to him is great, though, you know. It makes people not want to hate Mrs. Puff, which is probably what a lot of people want to do. Another moment from this episode that I really found not funny, but kind of memorable, is Patrick and the damn strawberry ice cream, okay? Like I said in the summary, Patrick's over there eating ice cream and SpongeBob ends up bumping into him. He's ended up dropping ice cream all over the place. And I like when they go into the ice cream shop to get some ice cream cones. You know, that's like Patrick's idea of being a criminal. He's like, oh, I'll go get an ice cream. And they do that like 2 or 3 times. But the main reason why I found this memorable was when I seen this episode as a kid, I really remember wanting to try strawberry ice cream. Because I was always a big chocolate ice cream person myself. But seeing Patrick eat strawberry ice cream, I'm like, that looks good and pink. I want to try it. And I ended up eating it for a while. But it never became my favorite. That's not a funny moment. That was just a nice, memorable one from my childhood, man. The cartoon kid just got some flashbacks. The moment with the police, obviously with Patrick, was pretty funny. He has a cone on his head. They're showing him a picture. He's just freaking having moments where he's scared shitless of the paper. He's like, oh, take him away, take him away. As soon as they show him the picture, it's like, oh, man, come on, Patrick. You too big to be getting scared like this, man. When it gets dark, which leads to my final favorite moment, the kid in Patrick really comes out, man. He's like, oh, SpongeBob, I'm scared. I want to go home. He's over there crying and whatnot. But SpongeBob's like, hey, put on your siren, man. I'll be right there. He was like, wee woo, wee woo. And he ends up running across a picture of the Bikini Bottom Maniac, which, of course, is SpongeBob. He ends up looking at it. Then he puts it down. He sees that the Maniac, a.k.a. SpongeBob, is right in front of him. So he just starts hollering. And I have to mention a final moment of this episode. You see Mrs. Puff in jail, basically teaching boating school from her cell, right? And she's like, SpongeBob, man, I gotta see you after class 6 months from now, you know, just basically tell him, hey, I have it out for you, bruh. Now, this, in my opinion, is so hilarious because you see Mrs. Puff right at the beginning of the episode, basically showing compassion to our spongy homie, man. Being like, oh, you can have the hall monitor badge. I can let you wear it for one day. You know, showing compassion to the guy. But throughout this entire episode, SpongeBob screws that up by taking his job way too seriously, way more serious than it needs to be, which ends up landing Mrs. Puff in jail because she's responsible for him. So I think it was pretty hilarious, that scene afterwards. She's like, hey, 6 months, I'm on your ass, bro. Overall, this episode is nothing but straight up comedy. As I said before, the whole idea of Mrs. Puff showing compassion, like I said, just gives you a nice soft spot for her, which was a really nice touch for this episode because I always thought Mrs. Puff was just a straight up bitch. I'm just being honest with you. Mrs. Puff to me has always came off to be a bitch, and this is the first time, the many times I've seen this episode, this is the first time that I noticed that, like, Mrs. Puff showed compassion for SpongeBob. I know it can't be missed completely, but this is the first time I actually sat down and really thought about it and really picked it up because I'm looking at this episode kind of like in a critical lens. Whereas any other time that I've seen this episode, I was just watching it just for pure enjoyment. I'm looking at it through a critical lens this time because I'm reviewing this for the Cartoon Kid channel, baby. But I actually noticed that and appreciated it for what it was. At least that's in my opinion. Everybody obviously is going to differ on that, but that's what really add that real nice special touch for this episode to me personally. Then, throughout the entire episode, you see SpongeBob trying to enforce the hall monitor duties, which should only be applied only at boating school, not out in Bikini Bottom. But SpongeBob is trying to be helpful. And you can't hate on our spongy homie for that, man. So, this episode is nothing but pure comedy, which, in my personal opinion, is what classic SpongeBob was. Nothing but pure comedy and good characters. I mentioned all my favorite comical moments of this episode, so I'm going to slap you guys right now with my rating for this, and I'm going to hit it with a nice 7 out of 10. This episode is a good classic episode of the series. Everybody talks about it, the whole Hall Monitor episode, and it's an episode that all SpongeBob fans should enjoy. Classic SpongeBob fans who've been with the series since day one, fans who started watching the series later on, like me. I started watching this in 2007, and even new SpongeBob viewers who just started watching the series, man, they should always start from season 1 to see some of the greatest episodes of the series. To put it simply, this is an episode that every single SpongeBob fan should know throughout all generations, man. You can see the characters brightly shine, especially Patrick. You can see SpongeBob in his good nature. Childish, but he's good at heart. He's trying to help everybody. And you can see Mrs. Puff, even though she kind of has it out for SpongeBob, she is a teacher. And at the end of the day, teachers have a soft spot for their students, no matter how much class clowns they usually are. And you see that displayed when she gives them the hall monitor badge for the day, because she was feeling sorry for him. So that, plus the comedic aspects of the episode, man, really took it away from me. So I'm going to hit this episode with, I said a 7 out of 10, but you know what? I feel like bumping that up to a 7.5. While this episode wasn't perfect, it was good for what it was. But that has been my review for SpongeBob SquarePants Season 1 episode, I forget already. But the name of this episode is called simply Hall Monitor. This is the Cartoon Kid, Ray Rollins, and we're on the Cartoon Kid channel where we talk cartoons, and we do it all the time, man. So subscribe, Tell me what you think of this episode. Tell me if you like it. Tell me if you hate it. Tell me what you would rate it. Toss your opinions and recommendations for future episodes of the series or other cartoons that you'd like me to review down in the comments box below. And I'll keep an eye out for it, man. But until next time, I will see you when I see you. Peace out, everybody.